Cortana, all I need to know is did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.
We made a blind jump. How did they...
Get here first? The Covenant ships have always been faster. As for tracking us all the way from Reach, at light speed my maneuvering options were limited.
Hi everyone, welcome again to another CPP GDC workshop. This is Enzo, and today we're going to be going more into depth as to how we can use tools and games to engage our player through a story. If you missed this week's meeting, we talked a bit about the different aspects that we can use to convey story in games. Today we're going to go more into depth and give examples as to how to tell a story. And what better way to do that than to look at an actual game? Today's game is Halo Combat Evolved, the very first Halo game, which, fun fact, is celebrating its 20th anniversary this month on the 15th. Despite its age, it gives great examples of setting up the simple story to the game atmosphere, which is supplemented by its memorable cutscenes.
And Cortana. Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
Let's start at the beginning. The very first shot of Halo brings into view the titular Halo ring, the origins of which become the basis of the plot. The cutscene, of course, uses techniques of traditional filmmaking. The framing of Halo against an unknown planet both demonstrates the scale of the place we will venture on, as well as how far we are from home. The first characters we meet are Captain Keyes and Cortana, who fill us in on what has occurred right before the start of the game. The ship, the Pillar of Autumn, is being chased by some alien force to this remote Halo ring. This is simple and sets up the story, but the dialogue helps us to understand the history of the characters and the direness of the situation. This is something that is utilized throughout all of Halo, using dialogue to tell the player the context of the situation and further enhance the tone. So far, everything that has taken place has been things that have been achieved through film. The next part, however, begins to utilize the advantages of the medium. The end of the cutscene has Captain Keyes make the decision to abandon the ship, and he gives the command to Cortana to wake up their old friend.
Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
This is where the player first gets to play the game as the main character, the Super Soldier Master Chief. The entire sequence for awakening the Master Chief is incredibly effective at communicating how powerful the Chief is, without ever seeing him in action or even playing as him. The cutscene involves using different code names for opening the pod that contains the Chief, such as unsealing the Hush casket. While this may seem like a way of hyping up the player, which it is, it also leads directly into the gameplay. The Master Chief is a super soldier, and one of the last remaining hopes for humanity in the war. His gameplay reflects this, from the recharging shield so that you can take a few shots before taking permanent damage, to the absurd amount of grenades that you carry, to the power of your melee attacks, from the height that you can fall without taking damage.
Chief, can you hear me? At last. Are you alright?
And even the arsenal that you have. All of these things contribute to the background of the character and the high regard that everyone has for the Chief. In this way, the gameplay is used to instill in the player a sense of power and give them a connection to this usually silent protagonist. After awakening from the pod, the Master Chief is brought through some diagnostics to test your controls. While this may seem standard, it helps build the atmosphere of the world while building up the character of the Master Chief further. An entire team of people is needed to calibrate his suit, which demonstrates just how important and powerful he is in the story. The rest of the level is pretty standard, with escaping the ship after reuniting with the ship's AI, Cortana. This point is of great importance and is even given a cutscene.
Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research, Earth.
I understand.
This raises the stakes of the situation, while making the player feel even more important in the story. The last thing that this level does, and really every level in Halo does, is that it uses Npc Dialogue to cement the relationships between the different players in the story. The human allies will all refer to you as the Chief and ask you to help them.
Careful! What the hell? Did something just hit us? Move it!
This adds into the persona of the Chief yet again. But this isn't just limited to human characters. The alien enemy, the Covenant, will also help build the world through their dialogue and gameplay as well. This is well known, but if you kill the elite that is leading a pack of grunts, the grunts will flee in terror. This demonstrates both the relationship between the enemies in the story, as well as the importance of each enemy in the gameplay. Finally, the grunts will refer to the chief in fear if they are on their own, which further cements the history that you have in the story and the power that your character has. Let's get into the other level that we're going to talk about today, 343 Guilty Spark. This level is incredibly important to the story, and we will be spoiling it. So if anyone does not want spoilers for this 20-year-old game, click off now. Or you could watch one of our other fantastic videos instead. Here's one. It's called How to Use Git and GitHub. It's a really good video. I worked really hard on it. Please watch it. Anyways, this level is a turning point in the game's story, a twist that has been celebrated for the last 20 years. The main way that the story is given through this level is through a thick atmosphere, but also by subverting expectations and gameplay that have been developing throughout the entirety of the story. The cutscene starts with a somewhat familiar scene, of grunts and jackals fleeing while the Master Chief lands into a foggy forest. This is nothing that unusual, as the gameplay has already established that grunts will flee. However, this usually happens only after you kill their leading elite. This is the beginning of the subversions that are present throughout the level. No other level has had a dreary atmosphere such as this one, but there are at least Marines to accompany you through the fog. Slowly, however, it becomes apparent that not everything is right in the level. You begin to come across enemies that have been killed before you even got there. Enemy battlements are left empty, when usually they are filled with enemies. In fact, one of the objectives of an earlier mission was clearing out the same type of battlements. Then, you come across ooze dripping from the ceiling. And eventually you'll come across the blood-stained hallways. One of the next turning points is coming across a Marine, an ally NPC, that tries to shoot you, thinking you're some other entity.
Stay back! You're not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out! Get away from me!
Finally, you come across not enemy remains, but your own ally remains. All of these subvert the expectations of the player, and demonstrate not just a turning point in the story, but that the formula that the players have been getting used to over all this time can be flipped at any time.
What is that? Where's that coming from, Mendoza? I don't... There! Get out! Hold still! Hold still! Let him have it! Ah! What is it? Roll! Take it!
All of the tension of walking through these empty hallways eventually leads into the big reveal, the Flood. The twist of Halo CE is that there's a third unknown faction in the conflict, an unstoppable parasitic force called the Flood, that aims to devour the entire galaxy. What was once a space shooter about exploring an unknown alien world becomes a game about the events that could affect the entire galaxy. It's at this point where I want to take a quick aside to talk about how as writers, we need to be working directly with the team rather than writing our story separately. The writer should be working closely in the development of the game so that all aspects are consistent in the tone and narrative of the story. In the original version of Halo, the art style and lighting of 343 Guilty Spark are consistent with the ominous and almost scary tone of the level. There's another version of this game, however, which is the 10th Anniversary Edition, which features remastered graphics. While the new graphics are much higher fidelity, they fail to capture the atmosphere of the level and are worse at setting up the point of the level. The most notable example is the change to the drip in the ceiling to the point where it's almost unnoticeable in the Anniversary Edition. This demonstrates that if not all parts of the team are on the same page about the story of the game, it can lead to inconsistent tone and other issues. So what have we learned looking through Halo? In addition to the use of cutscenes to set up the story and the atmosphere, the most notable thing was the designing of the gameplay to reflect the story as well. There are many great design aspects that add to the world of Halo while still serving a purpose. The color of the enemies even matter, as high-ranking elites will be more obvious due to the different colors. These are the types of decisions that need to be focused on when designing your game. I hope that you all learned a bit about how story is unique in games, or if not, at least you got a cool look through the Halo history. The story of our games can be difficult to create, but are extremely rewarding to everyone if done well. Thanks again to everyone, and I hope that everyone will finish the fight on their projects.
Sleep well?
No thanks to your driving, yes.
So you did miss me.